It seems like Minnesota's tanking in the major sports these days.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we're a hockey school, so that's kind of the only thing we're
Well,
consistent.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Basketball, I'm not very optimistic, but right now we are beating IUPUI 23-9, so that's pretty good.
Whoa. IUPUI, geez.
Yeah. Big
Yep.
time.
Big
That's
time,
impressive.
big time crowd there at the barn tonight too. Tell you what.
I bet. Man.
Big Ten's kind of strange this year. In Michigan State.
Wow.
So
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been going downhill fast.
yeah.
Did they? I mean, did they have like an exodus of guys after last year? So they don't look experienced as a team.
Well, I know they had like they had a top 5 recruiting class,
Uh-huh.
and those guys aren't doing much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Izzo's teams often get off to a bit of a rocky start, but I'm sure they'll find a way to get to the tournament. And once they're there, they're very dangerous. So.
I think what's kind of scary about Michigan State is they're unusually soft. You
Yeah.
watch them play, they don't crash the boards hard. They're not physical.
Yeah.
You don't seem to be reacting to Izzo, right now. Now, he hasn't lost a team or anything, but they just don't seem like his kind of guys.
Wow.
In Wisconsin, smoked them on the boards. That never happens.
No. That absolutely never happens.
Wisconsin seems like they suddenly came to life. I saw them towards the beginning of the season, and I thought, wow, it's going to be a nowhere year for Wisconsin. But they've looked much better lately.
Well, they played some good teams. I mean, obviously, Tennessee's a very, very good team.
Yeah.
And they lost to Providence, and you could argue that against Providence, they didn't show as well. But really, since then, with the exception of what happened against Arizona's tough.
Yeah. Evidently.
Wisconsin showed a lot of depth, and they play some pretty smart basketball. So that's I don't know how far they can go with that, because I'd say their top end talent may not be what you need to be really successful.
Mm-hmm.
But they could be a Sweet 16 or maybe Elite 8 team. Keep playing hard.
And John, don't you feel like every year, it takes the Badgers a few games to figure out that they've got to win with defense?
Yeah, that's true.
It's like they have to learn that lesson every time, and then they usually figure it out, and then they get a lot better.
Yeah, they have to. The players always want to play a little more free,
right?
And fly up and down the court, not crash the boards as hard. Just get out in the break. And Wisconsin's typically not built that way. But once they figure out when they stone a team with defense, that team has a real hard time dealing with it, because with Wisconsin can play a physical, disciplined brand of basketball. A lot of teams don't like playing against. It's annoying. It's frustrating. It's actually kind of fun to see Wisconsin totally thrash Virginia, when Wisconsin and Virginia are built pretty much the same in terms of types of players they recruit and the philosophy of how they play.
Yeah, they both recruit Wisconsin kids.
Yeah. Virginia's very active in Wisconsin picking up kids.
Yeah.
In fact, there have been some years Virginia has more Wisconsin kids, scholarship kids, than Wisconsin does.
Yeah.
Wow.
Little trivia for you.
Kind of like what we do to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's going to pick Minnesota clean.
Yeah, that could happen this year. I'm not real optimistic about Gopher basketball, although we beat Nebraska, so we at least have a Big Ten win.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got that going for you.
Yeah. So we'll take that.
You gonna take that, Bobby? You're just gonna sit there, let them continue to taunt the Gophers?
Well, again, we're a hockey school, so that's the only thing I have great confidence in. It wouldn't surprise me if Ben Johnson gets fired at some point during the season or at the end. I mean, unless we really pick things up, but I don't know. I mean, like our last game, the guys on Big Ten Network were talking about they'd be surprised if the Gophers aren't in the tournament, which didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me based on how we've played. But maybe they were just trying to be optimistic. I don't know.
Big Ten Network.
Yeah.
It could be. I don't know
Because
why.
our non-conference is terrible. I mean, we lost to Missouri. That was really our only chance at like a win that would help at all. The rest of our non-conference is mostly a joke. Like we lost to San Francisco by like 20. And you know, we're just playing a bunch of losers over and over again. We beat Florida Gulf Coast. Now we're beating IUPUI. We're not going to help our net rankings at all. We're going to have to get some Big Ten wins.
Florida Gulf.
Big Ten, Big Ten tournament makes some noise. Like win it.
Right. Well, it's in Minnesota this year. So
The Big Ten tournament?
yeah,
Really?
real excited.
Are you going?
I mean, if we're halfway decent, I'd consider it. If we suck, I'm not going to watch us lose on a Wednesday.
Are they moving that around a bit now? A little more?
Apparently, I mean, it's usually in Indy or Chicago. I think it was in Chicago last year.
And did they do it in like New York City a few years ago?
They did one year.
Yeah.
That didn't work out well. They had to play a week before the Big East, right? So once the tournament came around, you had kind of a cold start. A lot of Big Ten teams hadn't played in 9, 10, 11, 12 games days, which didn't really look so good. And then obviously if you've got to play a sort of the preliminary tournament before the Big East tournament, it doesn't look so good either.
I got a question for the guys with business degrees. How do you like Shohei Ohtani's contract with the Dodgers? $700 million, but he collects almost all of it after 10 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, so Bob, he's opening up. He's doing this to open up space, like there were other salaries, right?
He wants some people to sign other guys while he's on the team. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't know. I think it's
deferred most of his money.
Put him on. I mean, he'll be on a better team, which is good for his own exposure.
Yeah.
I think he's making like $45 million a year anyway, outside of his contract.
Yeah. He'll
So,
manage somehow. Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Does that money collect any like interest or whatever for him? Because is there some way that he can earn more money at the end of that, or is it gonna be that exact amount? Because I guess
I think I heard there was no interest.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So he's gonna lose money over time, I guess. But
Well, it will shrink. Yeah. Which is why you sort of ponder the overall scope of the contract. But he's making so much money so many different ways.
So Jon Rahm contract was probably a little more favorable then, because he got
If it were 500 million,
like 560, and you got 300 up front.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
another
what's
deception to the LIV? Yeah. What was that?
What's the
Was that
story in the
surprising?
golf world now?
Yeah, it's weird because back in, I think it was during the summertime when they announced their tentative merger plans, right?
Yeah.
And with I guess the hope that they would have it all figured out by the end of the year. But here you've got the LIV side poaching Jon Rahm, and then you've got the PGA Tour at the same time out talking to other investors. So it's kind of like both sides are, rather than doing things to come together, they're doing things to strengthen their own hand,
Mm-hmm.
if
So
you're
I
a
don't
guy
know.
like a guy like Jon Rahm, and I've always liked Jon Rahm until he did this.
Yep.
But he's basically, I mean, if you're just strictly from a financial standpoint, he's cashing in big before a deal gets struck.
Yeah.
If a deal doesn't get struck, he's just got a ton of money.
Yeah.
What that says about Jon Rahm or how much he really needs that's a different question. It's interesting that his values changed so much in the last couple of months, but
Yeah.
it kind of is what it is. You know, as someone who really likes college football and professional golf, I tend to sour more on each one of those by the day.
It's
You know, you could take a look what's going on over in Lincoln, Nebraska,
Mhm.
in terms of pulling out this quarterback probably at the very last second away from Georgia. I'm not a Georgia fan,
Yeah.
but obviously this is all about this kid getting money.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And it's like how big, how much, how fast, and you know the way this kid and his agents are treating colleges right now. If Nebraska gets him for a year, they might be lucky.
Yeah, and you hear about Ohio State might be getting Marvin Harrison Jr. back because there are rumors he's being offered 25 million to come back, which would be more than he'd make as a rookie NFL. That's more than he would make as a top 5 pick.
Well, that's true, but the big contracts for NFL players is the second contract. So he postpones that huge second contract if he does indeed do that.
That's true.
But I mean, on the other hand, you could say, geez, man, if I could take 25, let's say it is 25 million. I can take $25 million today. And if I'm smart enough just to salt a little bit of that away, I'm set for life.
Sure. Oh, sure.
You know, so it's a different playing field.
Really is.
Don't know how much you can actually like it or appreciate it.
It feels all wrong.
It does. It does. I don't. It seems like there's just basically a lot of talent. He's going to get salted away in a limited number of programs, and you're going to be bringing kids to your university for some of the wrong reasons.
Oh, well, just strictly as mercenaries. It's just
without question.
And that's of course going to be the attitude of the kids who are coming. It's going to be tricky to manage them.
Yeah. It's going to be very tricky. And especially with the transfer portal works with guys who need to jump ship to a different program. I don't know if bringing a lot of transfer portal kids is really great for the culture of your program in the long run.
Yeah.
You know, I would, at least to this point, give, PJ Fleck a little bit of consideration from that perspective. Though a lot of things about PG Fleck I really don't care for. But I do think that's a problem as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how much do you really want to rally around programs where so much of it is built around money and greed and loyalty and culture and playing for Old State U is no longer the reason that you're there.
Mm-hmm. That has got to affect the passion of the fan base, you would think, for those who care.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter in the SEC. I don't know.
I mean,
yeah.
John, Charlie, Dad, could you foresee what college sports has become like 20, 30 years ago? Could you imagine that it would be just like this way with people throwing tons of money at college kids, competing like they're professional athletes? Could you foresee something like this happening?
In a very generalized sense, I was able to imagine it happening because the money was getting bigger and bigger, and players weren't getting any of it. And so at some point, I wondered if this wasn't going to blow up. I didn't foresee the mechanisms that are at work here, and I didn't foresee the astonishing speed with which all this has been happening, and how quickly team cultures have been unraveling, and you got kids now who are going to be making much more than the assistant coaches or the head coaches. Sometimes it's crazy.
Yeah, nobody knew what a collective was 2-3 years ago.
No.
And all of a sudden, if you don't have one, you can't compete.
I think probably 15, 20 years ago, you could start to see that the NCAA was being perceived more and more as a hindrance, as an annoyance to a lot of big time athletic programs. And the bigger ones were looking to, either form, either consolidate like they have down in the big Power 5 conferences, or just get away from the NCAA altogether. So I mean, that's part of this as well, because the TV revenue, the big bowls money, all flows to certain schools at this point, and you bring that intersection with what Bob just brought up in terms of sort of college players with talent being better able to leverage a free market system. It wasn't inevitable that was going to happen, but I agree, it's happening, and happening fast. And there's no serious regulation in play to alter the course that we're on. So really, it's, if you look out the next 3-5 years, it's hard to see things getting anything but perhaps much worse. And at what point and how you reel it in, that's a great question.
The day that the committee announced the 4 berths for the playoffs, I noticed that the commissioners of the Big Five had also gone to Washington to lobby for some regulation to get this thing even at a national level, because they were complaining that now states are setting their own rules, and some states are manipulating state law to keep kids at home by offering incentives. And meanwhile, the head of the NCAA has rolled out a proposal of his own that he announced over the weekend, which it's not clear to me quite how this would work, but it would regulate it to some degree. And it was going to, I think a school, in order to be a part of this group, was going to have to show a minimum of $30 million in their pot to play. It was a lot of evolution to happen here, but it's interesting how quickly folks are getting nervous.
Yeah. It's just different as a fan. I get solicitations now from UW, for NIL money when I'm willing to contribute. And it's like, really? I mean, correct.
Yeah.
That just like, it's a bridge too far. At least at this point.
Yeah.
John, I'm curious how are they direct about how they're going to use those funds? Is it kind of with a athletic competitive edge to it?
Well, they obviously, when they solicit the funds, they talk about supporting the school and supporting the teams.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful thing this can be done because it's being done the right way, to support kids and help them get their education and come out at the end of let's say 3, 4, 5 years on campus with a degree that's really meaningful, that they can live really good lives. So that they position it that way. And no one tells you how much money to give, only that all your money will be greatly appreciated and well utilized. But it's pretty loose. I mean, if some 501c3 came knocking on my door and they wanted money for something, and it was ambiguous, as confusing as what they've laid out so far, I have a hard time giving it to it. I will say that I think the people at UW who are in charge of it are very bright people, and they're well-meaning people. But I think they're having a hard time figuring out how to market it.
Yeah, Minnesota, they have kind of a number of different ways that you can contribute, but one is essentially a subscription model,
Right,
where you just buy in at a certain level, and depending on how much, you get access to exclusive content that from players, where they give like exclusive interviews and things like that. But you can also put your money towards a particular sport if you want, and have it funneled a particular way of your choosing. And you can also purchase t-shirts with your favorite player's name, and that goes to their particular NIL and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different avenues involved, and also lots of local Minnesota companies are allowing you to purchase a certain beer or a percentage of pizza profit from a pizza chain will go to NIL collective and stuff like that.
Sure.
So John, like in the case of Wisconsin, if you look at some of the athletes who are getting bigger money, let's say start with Braylon Allen, right? Maybe he's getting $500,000, whatever. Is much of that funneling through the NIL, or is a lot of that direct? With
I don't know the answer to that question. That's something that's crossed my mind as well. Is how is this happening?
Yeah.
It would seem to me that a lot of opportunities go outside the collective.
A lot of the big ones, I would think, especially.
Yeah, because it's just going to be just some organization that they want that player as part of their brand, right? And going through the collective, it might actually get in the way.
Right.
Whereas I think with the collective, what they're trying to do is find, okay, you got. I assume, I don't know this because I haven't studied real hard. But let's say you've got an athlete on campus who's pretty good, but is maybe undiscovered, or you got a high school kid from somewhere else, and you want to be able to establish for them that you have a mechanism in place where you can get them money. That gives that athlete some peace of mind that, okay, there's somebody here who's got a mechanism to get me what I need. And certainly, I don't know the specifics of like with Wisconsin's deals. I mean, it's a little bit cloudy with this kid from Syracuse, just what he's been promised. Because you read the various articles, it sounds like he felt that he was basically, it was suggested to him that certain dollar amounts of NIL money will be available to him. Although UW basically asserts that they've offered him nothing.
Right.
So, if you sort of parse the words and nuance the truth, where is it? So.
Yeah, you're hearing stories like that. PJ Fleck has mentioned he's heard stories from student athletes or just from other reporters and saying, yeah, there have been scenarios where a kid was promised money to go to a school, commits, goes there, shows up,
Right.
and there's nothing. So you got to wonder if there's any sort of vetting process with all of this. If, just random people are promising money and not necessarily associated with the school, because in a certain way, the school can't be directly involved in a lot of ways. And so,
They're not supposed to be.
Right. So you could see situations like that happen.
Right.
Where you got third parties coming in and promising stuff, but then it never comes to fruition.
Well, guys, to jump to say topics of note on the current agenda here, there's a debate going on right now. It was pretty hot a week ago, but I think it's still something that I'd love to see the great minds here weigh in on, and that is when it comes to the college football playoff. We're down to 4 teams. 4 teams were selected. Of course, starting next year, there'll be 12, but for now, there's only 4. And there's 5 Power 5 conferences. And we've got a fair amount of history now with a 4-team playoff to know how things should work or how they've traditionally worked. But the debate comes down to, who do you want in that 4-team playoff? Do you take the 4 most deserving teams, the teams that have done everything they could possibly have done and have met all the expectations that could have been met to qualify for that playoff? Or do you take what are seemingly the 4 best teams at the end of the season, because that makes for the highest quality level of football? Alabama or Florida State? The perceived best versus the more deserving. Benny, what do you think?
So I think this situation kind of highlights everything I don't like about college sports. And that is you're in a situation where it becomes kind of political about who's going to be in the playoffs or not. The idea that a team can win every game during a season and still not make the playoffs just makes zero sense in any sport ever. It's just dumb. The selection process for playoffs is obviously based off of it's like in an MVP award. It's based on a bunch of opinions, perhaps, but it's not based on actual statistics and performance, which should be the only thing that matters when it comes to selecting teams for playoffs. I mean, I understand that college sports, you got hundreds of schools playing D1 football, and not everyone, is playing the same level of competition. But I don't care what school you are. If you're Division I and you finish undefeated, at least let people play in some type of like play-in game or something to make it to the playoffs and give them a chance. Because Florida State's one school that was undefeated, and there are other schools that were undefeated that never had a chance to even be selected for playoffs. I think like Liberty University or something was undefeated, and yes, they're not playing competition like, Alabama or Florida State, but they're still undefeated. At least let them try to make it to the playoffs. So I think there should be some type of play-in bracket where, hey, if you finish undefeated, it doesn't matter, who you're playing during the year. If you're a D1 football team, you have the chance to make the playoff by competing in this little mini tournament prior to, the Final Four, essentially. I think that would be the fairest way to do it and generate interest, because right now, essentially, if you're not, kind of one of the favored schools, you're going to be kind of shorthanded or, given the short end of the stick there by the selection committee, which obviously is political in nature. I mean, it's just stupid. But another issue that seems to be popping up in college sports, because so much of it is, obviously battling kind of corruption to a certain extent. It's such a greedy business right now. And I'm saying that, from someone who's less than a few miles from the NCAA headquarters. So,
okay. NCAA basketball, you've got the Liberties of the world. You got the Cinderellas out there, and there are enough games going on, and there are enough choices of games that you can watch that if you see and to tune into a game where a Liberty is whacking a Duke, it's cool. It's fun. It's part of that tournament, because 2 days later you play another team and you move on. Whereas with college football, it's hard to see a Liberty actually competing against a Michigan or an Alabama, and fan support, TV ratings will show that. So you can understand the pressure to come out with big time teams who can put on big time performances. I don't know if I'd like where we're at with an Alabama going. I think they are probably a better team than Florida State right now. But I think it kind of sucks that Florida State has played as well as they have. They haven't had the opportunity to get into the playoffs as frequently, say, as an Alabama has. And by sort of virtue of a bad luck hardship scenario, here we are again with Alabama in the playoffs. Charlie, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I'm not as bothered by it maybe as Ben was. I don't know that the committee is historically real clear about what they're trying to accomplish. But I think if you're trying to pick the best four teams, then I think they probably got it right in this case. I can see where Florida State feels like they got screwed, but it probably did come down to their quarterback getting hurt. And if you look at their last couple of games, I think they scored 40 points in their last two wins. They gained like not even 450 yards in their last two games. I mean, if they went into the college football playoff with their second or third string quarterback, chances are they get smoked. And then we'd be talking about why Alabama should have been in there. So I'm not that troubled by it. I think the problem's going to, for the most part, go away when we go to a 12-team playoff anyway. Of course, there will still be debates about who got in and who didn't get in, but the stakes won't be as high as they are when it's when you're just picking a 4-team playoff. So I don't know, didn't bother me that much. Maybe it's because I also don't mind seeing like Florida State fans get all pissed off.
Understood. I guess if you really look at the 4 best teams, let's just say you had to just really sit down and noodle everybody which teams they think are the 4 best. Wouldn't Georgia be on that list?
Probably. Maybe you boot Washington.
I mean, you could easily argue that, hey, Christ, maybe Ohio State gets another look here. I mean, you can't. I don't necessarily know that we have the 4 best. So I think it's like this is a pretty convoluted political system. What do you make of it, Bob?
It reminds me of the game rock, paper, scissors, where it depends on the matchups. I mean, folks talk about Texas, and Texas beat Alabama. Well, you can make an argument that Alabama shouldn't be in the Final Four because they already got beat by one of the teams that is. But Alabama beat Georgia, and I think Georgia's got an excellent case, as good a case as Alabama probably to get in, except that Georgia lost to Alabama. But Georgia could well be the best team in the country, and they're not there. One of the interesting things that turned up when they were rehashing the analysis of the committee was that they brought up that part of their mandate is to, quote, protect the product. And that means it's all about entertaining games and a little less about who might deserve to actually be there, which is a point of philosophical divide. It also bothers me a little bit that they actually take into account the absence of a player, quarterback in this case, in Florida State. Okay, one of your guys gets hurt, so the team suffers and their wins don't matter because this guy's not going to be there and they won't have the most entertaining product possible. Is that really the way we want to think about this? Or should it be about the team and, struggling to victory and working through adversity together and all the things that, like character-related things that they love to talk about historically with relation to college football and college sports. But it really seems in the end, it came down to what's marketable to TV.
You know what? I think you're right. Nick, as somebody's going to be glued to the TV throughout this playoff series, where do you come down on this?
I mean, the 4 best teams argument, I think, is kind of fair. And the week before, though, Florida State they were number 4. So I guess they thought they were one of the 4 best teams then. And they proceeded to win their next game against a good Louisville team. Let's not discount them. But I don't get it. I mean, why do we play the games if at the end of the year we're just gonna kind of arbitrarily decide these are the 4 best teams? I mean, it's kind of rooted in college football's history, I guess. It's like 2002 they instituted the BCS championship. Before that, it was just an AP vote you found out on, I guess, the day after New Year's. I think I really feel for Florida State. You start out week 0, these guys just know they have to win. The coach is telling you win week in, week out, you'll have a chance. These guys didn't get it. Obviously, next year we won't have this issue. I would be curious. I mean, Liberty's 13-0. If Liberty went 13-0 next year, would people be clamoring for them to be in the playoffs? That'd be interesting. But I don't get it. I mean, in every sport, there's always conjecture about who's the best chance. But it doesn't really matter until you play the games. Here you got a Florida State team that kind of did everything they could, but are being left out anyway. I guess it was kind of looking back at like 2016. I think Alabama didn't even make it to the SEC championship game. But they got into playoffs, ended up winning. So they were, probably the best team that year, but did they deserve to have the chance? It's kind of, a couple years here where they're getting extra chances.
So Bobby, let's get some perspective on this. There's the argument that, if you want to go with the four best teams, that, Alabama's in there. But at the same token, you go back a couple years ago, Cincinnati got into the tournament somehow. How did they make that? How did Cincinnati get in 2 years ago when you got all these other big name schools that in theory should have finished out in front of Cincinnati, whether Cincinnati was undefeated or not? Bobby, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that happened a few years ago is because we have a committee who doesn't really know what they're doing. I mean, I think this is one of the most gutless decisions I've ever seen in the history of sports, is Florida State not getting into the tournament. I mean, Nick hit the nail on the head. What's the point of playing the games if we're not going to allow the most deserving team to go? You think it's impossible Florida State could win a game in the playoffs with a backup quarterback who would be available, by the way? Ohio State won a national championship with a third string quarterback. Florida State is one of the best defenses in the country. As we've noted, Alabama lost to Texas at home. Should have lost to Auburn if it wasn't for a miracle play at the end. Florida State beat two SEC teams, including LSU. So the fact that you're not allowing Florida State to go in because of, and really the only reason is because the quarterback is hurt, but the fact that that is part of the criteria just makes this so obvious how ridiculous having a committee is. I mean, what we need to do is just go back to a computer system of some sort, because it's pretty obvious the clowns running the committee can't handle it. Whether it's a BCS system, with some new integration, with some new data. I mean, luckily we're going to have the 12-team playoff starting next season, so we can avoid anything this catastrophic. But I think we need to go back to a computer system, because there's way too much politicizing involved. I mean, really, they're just catering to the SEC at this point. They couldn't fathom what would happen if there was no SEC team in the playoffs, so they had to find a way to get one. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really a farce. I mean, the fact that Michigan is in, and they're going to be the 1 seed, and they had this huge scandal during the season. Their coach was suspended 6 games. But you're gonna let them in, but you're not going to let Florida State in. Yeah, I mean, it's completely ridiculous. And my hope is that Washington or Texas will win.
Can you
I'm
imagine?
with you on your Michigan point.
I'm just
Go ahead,
curious.
Charlie.
Yeah, they cheated. They cheated. Everybody knows they cheated. Why they are allowed to be in the playoff is beyond me. They're good.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that it's an NCAA playoff and the NCAA needs more time to evaluate the extent of the cheating?
Well, no. Well, I mean, that's what you're saying is true, but it's a lame excuse.
Do you think if they had not cheated, do you think they'd still have this quality of team?
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah. It's interesting. You listen to different experts. Some experts kind of poo-poo any advantage they would have gotten. Other ones, including like Urban Meyer, said it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm of the opinion they're probably one of the 4 best teams. So glad to see them. I'm glad to see them, either way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're probably one of the best 4, but they cheated.
I'm unserious.
And I keep hearing this argument about, well, you got to be, you don't want to penalize them in such a way that it penalizes the players, right? Which is one of the reasons why they suspend Harbaugh. Well, what about the players on the other teams? aren't they all getting screwed? So I don't know. I just think it's pretty disgusting. I think the attitude of, Michigan's kind of taken the same playbook that all politicians take these days, where everybody knows you're lying, but you just double down and say you're not, and I don't know, act like you're the victim, and now you're America's team. It's like it's such a crock of BS.
Can you imagine?
Anyways.
Though? I mean, I'm just curious because I think when people who just religiously watch college sports, they kind of get stuck in a college sports bubble in a way. I mean, could you possibly imagine a selection committee for the NFL playoffs, for God's sakes? I mean, people would be burning cities to the ground over something like this. It's just so insane. It's completely ridiculous. I know, sorry, your team, though you're a pretty good team, but actually it's more interesting if we have this matchup, the big money market teams in there instead of, Kansas City. It's a great team in Kansas City, but too small of a market. We can make more money. Let's have New York City, LA. Let's go. It's just ridiculous. The whole thing is so dumb. But in general, NCAA has been a shit show for a long time. So
Yeah, that's an interesting point, but I think the NBA, I think they tried that with Tim Donaghy and company. Didn't work out so well. Maybe it did. I don't know. But I mean, also, why can't we have upsets or a Florida State team that, why is it a better reason that they're stumbling in without their star quarterback?
This is college sports. You got 18 to 20-year-old kids. You think there can't be upsets? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, come on. Jesus. Unbelievable.
I agree.
I think we struck a nerve with Bobby there.
Bobby's getting texts now nominating him for governor of Florida, by the way.
That's another funny element of this, right? I mean, DeSantis is going to dedicate like $1 million to get in the bottom.
Lawsuit.
Florida AG's starting to poke around. Come on.
Yeah, he's going to go spend $1 million after the fact.
Right.
Nobody cares. It's too late.
I wonder how much sports betting goes into, like, are there people betting right now? But for example, before this happened, do you think there was betting going on about like who the selection committee would choose, for example? Like, I put this much money on the selection committee choosing Alabama instead of Florida State. Because I mean, you could just easily see all the ways this would get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
I don't know if that particular bet was sanctioned in Vegas or not, but I'm sure that particular bet was had many places.
I'm surprised it wasn't. I mean, you could even, if you just looked at team national championship odds, you could kind of do it by proxy.
Yeah.
So, Bobby, got a 12-team playoff coming up here. What's the solution? What do we do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable. We'll get to 16. I think that would allow you to have an automatic bid for every conference champion, like every other college sport basically has. I think something similar to the college hockey model is the way to do it. You get 16 teams, automatic bid for conference champions, and then you just do computer rankings after that. And you could even, you could do the AP poll. I'm fine with that. Or just a computer ranking for the rest. I mean, the nice thing about college hockey is they could just go off the pairwise rankings. So there's automatic bids for the conference champions, and then the rest is pairwise rankings, just the computer rankings. So whether you're going to get in or not before the selection show, and you can calculate whether you'll get in based on different results. So you can go into the final weekend knowing what you have to do to get in. There's no secret. There's no controversy. It just is what it is. You got to take care of your business. So I think, that's eventually what we're gonna get to. I mean, the lower divisions, 1AA and D2, D3, they have. I think they all do a 16 team. So yeah, I think I think that's where we're going to end up at some point.
Nick, in your ideal world, where do you see this all going? What would be good for college sports, and what would make you happy as a fan?
for college football.
Sure.
Or are we talking about kind of playoff scenarios, or are we talking about the
Well, let's say playoff scenarios.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, next year will be 12. I think automatic bids for, I don't know if they call it Power Five at that point, whatever it is. Throw in the Pac-12. I mean, I guess yeah. So obviously Pac-12 would be weird. Maybe it's the Mountain West. I don't know. Whatever version of maybe the top 6 or 7 conferences there are. I think automatic bids, like Bobby said, is good. I wouldn't, computer rankings make sense. I wouldn't hate, having a slot for a team like Liberty that's probably not going to get one of those automatic conference bids, assuming their conference isn't part of that. But having a spot for those undefeated teams, I think that's just interesting. Maybe the TV market doesn't love that, but I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that will somehow. I think that
Mhm.
will be built in to a degree. I think it's going to be the highest ranked group of 5 team is
Mhm.
going to get an automatic bid. So
Okay.
this year it would be Liberty, I believe,
I think
or it
so.
might be SMU. I mean, it might depend on what poll you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, just any way to.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's the best part of college basketball, especially with the tournament, is random teams coming out of nowhere. I think we really haven't seen much of that, or at least the opportunity for it. It seems like the talent gap in college football is a little bit wider than it is in basketball.
Yeah,
So you might not have as many of those upsets, but
it's tougher because the rosters are so huge.
yeah.
So
But I mean, I'd still love to see it.
yeah,
I agree. It is tougher in football. You can say what you want about Urban Meyer, but he made the comment, in football, outside like the top 6 or 8 teams, he said that the other teams don't have a chance because the talent gap is so big.
Mhm.
That teams like this year, like Wisconsin or Minnesota, they don't have a realistic shot at taking on a heavyweight like an Alabama or a Michigan or someone like that right now.
yeah. My hope, and NIL might screw this all up, but my hope was with the expansion of the playoff, there might be a little bit more diversification of the talent spread out, because more teams would have a chance to compete for a title. You don't have everybody trying to go to the top blue blood school where they're going to have the best chance, or really their only chance to get to a playoff is if you're on one of those top teams. Now you can still get into the playoff if you're, a team like a Liberty or a team that's in a Power 5 conference that's not always at the top, that still might be able to sneak in. So I'm hoping that will help, but yeah, again, NIL might take it the other way.
So here's a question, and maybe let's start with let's say with Bob and Charlie on this one. You look 8 years down the road. 8 years down the road with the playoff, that's college football playoff, that's at least 12 teams. You got NIL, playing a bigger and bigger role in college sports along with the transfer portal. Which schools, as we see it today, which schools are the new winners or the winners in that scenario, and which schools are the losers? Bob, you want to take a shot at that?
I think the winners will mostly be the same group that we're looking at now. There's always the possibility for somebody to come along in the outside lane if they've got alumni, a few super wealthy folks who want to cough up a ton of money to affect the NIL portion of it. So there is possibly a greater chance than now that you could have some team that's really not on the horizon today, it's maybe, between 40 and 50 at the moment, who could 8 years from now be a real force. Don't know who that might be. It might be a Syracuse, who the heck knows. But The transfer portal is going to keep the pot stirring all the time. That's going to tend to concentrate players at a smaller number of schools, I suspect. Though we don't know for sure. I think it is going to separate the upper echelon from the lower echelon, because there's going to be very little movement of top players from the highest level, down a level. That's just, I just can't foresee that happening. I see big impact on the bowl games in the future out of all this. Maybe the bowls will be affiliated with the games for the top 16 teams. But right now, when you have bowl games being played with teams that have 500 records, or in the case of Minnesota, sub 500 record, when you have a lot of players now committing to the transfer portal before their team plays their bowl game, the bowl games are going to seem less and less relevant. I also think if you go to a 16 team playoff, there might be some talk about shortening the regular season schedule. Otherwise, you do get kids playing 16 games in some instances with the top two teams. That's a whole bunch. That's an NFL schedule practically. And given all the factors involved, injuries, of course, a few might be concerned about academics. I as someone who knows a bit about academics, I fail to see how a kid who played in 4 different schools over 4 years could ever navigate the wickets to a degree. With the problem of transfer credits and different requirements for majors and so on and so forth, I don't see how you can pull that off. But there's going to be a shakeup.
For sure. Charlie, you have an early read on that?
Yeah, just a little bit of side comment that Bob made me think about. You look at a lot of these kids that don't even play in a bowl game these days, because they're going to be in the NFL next year. They're like, I don't want to get hurt, that kind of thing. I would imagine that any kid who's in those is on a playoff team will feel a lot more pressure to play now than they would today. I mean, today, unless the kid's in the college football playoff, if he's going to the NFL, he's wavering, and a lot of kids decide not to play in those bowl games. That'll probably be different now with the playoff. Anyway, that aside, I think it's going to be the effect of money will be greater and greater. So, and I agree with everything Bob said. There's going to be the obvious schools. There's the Texas A&Ms who should benefit. But, when you look at the amount of money that it takes maybe to establish yourself as a wealthy and successful college football program, it's probably in the few tens of millions of dollars a year, at least right now. Well, any multi-billionaire alum, that's chump change. So if they care enough to want their school, to compete, they can single-handedly make that happen, assuming that dollars are all it takes to affect that sort of change. So anyway, bottom line is, I think, money is going to talk more than ever.
It's a pretty strange thing to think about, when it comes to money in college sports. Here we are, a society where our main education systems, the most important aspect seems to be the sports teams, which are not supposed to be professional, but are basically are. Looking good, America. Really good.
Did Elon Musk go to college?
I think he did, yeah.
You know where?
I think it might have went to Penn or something, but I'd have to check where his degree is from. But I'm pretty sure he got a bachelor's degree somewhere.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to explain college sports and NIL to a foreigner right now? You're like, what?
What the hell?
Like,
so with your society?
Yeah. So why do you have colleges again? Like, what's the main purpose? We like to watch football and roll tide.
Is this like a professional league that, whoever wants to can kind of buy their way to the top first? Nobody's really gone for it yet.
Right, yeah.
Is there gonna be an arms race that just hasn't started yet?
I major in football. That's it. They might as well make it a degree. I mean, honestly, why are they not giving out degrees? Just they're not going to class anyway. If you're at a top football school, I mean, how many of these people actually do their own schoolwork versus just having tutors that basically hold their hand the entire way? You might as well start punching out degrees in football, and then they can enter back into the system as a coach later or something. It's just the whole thing's ridiculous.
Bob, do you see any schools just saying, you know what, I don't want to participate in this. I'm taking a powder. Goodbye, Division I sports.
That decision might be forced on a few. We haven't seen all of the evolution here yet. I'm not quite sure what the Ivy League will do. I could imagine possibly a scenario in which the Ivy League would say, okay, we got to go D3, because we're not going to do this. Although the Ivy League schools all have some kind of NIL program at this point, they're not super lucrative. Although, hey, that one alum who wants to come along and transform a team, especially a basketball team, step in and do it, I suppose. The funny side of the money equation in the Ivy League is you may have read Northwestern tried this a decade ago, didn't quite work out, but the Dartmouth basketball team has sued to unionize. This strikes me as a trifle ironic, given their profile in D1 and their record. I think they've beaten one Division I opponent this year. They have a cogent argument about how much effort they have to put in and the time demands and so on and so forth. But the fact is, you can quit playing basketball and you're still enrolled and your financial aid doesn't change and so on and so forth. So that sounds like a long shot, but you never know what's going to happen these days.
No, it's really hard to tell. All right, so we're coming up on an hour on our show here. It's about time to wrap it up. I want everybody, give me your best shot. Which two teams make it to the final in the college football playoff, and who walks away with the crown? Nick, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think in an unfortunate, I guess, sequence of fate, I think Alabama is going to beat Michigan. I think Texas is going to beat Washington. I think Alabama is going to win the rematch to win their second undeserved national championship in the last, I guess, 5 years or so.
All right. Benny, what's your call?
I have the exact same thing. I am complete pessimist about college football. I think it's be Alabama or Texas, two teams that no one probably wants to see, but states that seem to be putting their priorities in the right place, which is college football. So looking good.
All right, Bobby, what's the call?
Yeah, so I just can't bring myself to do that. So I've got Michigan over Alabama and Washington over Texas. And I have Washington winning the national championship.
Wow. All right.
Well, you're like
there's an outlier.
Down world.
All right. Charlie, you're kind of chuckling at that. What's your call?
I'm with the other guys. I've got Alabama beating Texas in the championship.
All right. And finally, Bob.
I think it's going to be an Alabama-Texas final, and it's probably a coin flip. Tonight, I'll give Texas the nod to beat them again. I think Texas will not be at all intimidated playing Alabama since they've already done it once this year. And I think psychology is part of that. As for Michigan, once they break through the barrier and win one of these playoff games, I'll have greater faith in their in the overall quality of their product. Washington, I was a little unsure about all year long. I still don't know how good Washington really is.
All right. Well, I'm going to close it out by saying, hey, it looks to me like I hate to say I'm going to root for Michigan because I don't want to root for Michigan, but I think Michigan's going to knock out the Crimson Tide, and I think Washington's going to take it to Texas. And I think at the end of the day, although I don't like how they got there, I think Michigan is going to wind up being your national champion, and there's going to be a lot of frustration and angst built all around that. But you know what? That would just be probably true to form for a fairly controversial college football season. All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We had a great discussion. We'll be back to more fun here with Generation Gap Sports. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Night.